The sky was the color of ash as the shuttle crashed through the atmosphere. It had taken a hit during the retreat. The engines failed. Fire trailed behind as it fell toward the snow-covered cliffs of planet Urea 9. Inside, alarms screamed, and sparks flew. The alien girl clutched the straps of her seat, her scaled fingers trembling. Her heart raced as the human beside her fought to keep the shuttle steady. "Brace!" he shouted. "I'll try to land near that ridge." The crash was violent. Metal tore against rock. When everything finally stopped, silence returned. The smoke slowly cleared. Snow began to fall on the cracked windows. They were alive. Barely, the crew was gone. Only the human pilot and the alien girl had survived. She checked her limbs and winced. Her left shoulder was bruised. The human pulled himself up, his armor cracked but intact. He looked at her and asked if she was okay. She nodded, but avoided his eyes. Her species did not show pain or fear. But now she was far from home, stranded with a human who barely knew her name. Her orange scales shimmered faintly in the cold light, and she instinctively turned away. He didn't stare. He didn't react. He simply opened the hatch and stepped out into the frozen wind. "We need shelter before night falls," he said. They hiked up a narrow path through the ice. The wind howled around them, but the human walked in silence, checking the path for danger. The girl followed, her claws gripping frozen rock. At the top of the ridge, they found it. A single building made of steel and stone. It looked abandoned, but the door still worked. Inside it was warmer. Lights flickered on. The air was dry and still. There was one bed. A large one, meant for long-range scouts. The human paused and looked at it. She looked too, then quickly looked away. "You take it," he said. "I'll sleep on the floor." Her voice was low. "No, we will freeze like that. The systems are barely working. This room won't hold heat alone." The human hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but I'll stay on the edge." "You have my word." She didn't answer. She removed her jacket slowly, trying to hide the curves of her body beneath the thin sleepwear. Her kind rarely showed skin. It was sacred. She felt exposed. The human turned his back as she changed. When he turned around, she was already under the blanket. Only her face and hands were visible. She watched him quietly as he lay beside her, fully armored, staring at the ceiling. She waited for the fear to come. Waited for the disgust in his eyes, but it never came. He simply whispered, "We'll make it through the night, I promise." She closed her eyes. The warmth from his body was strange, different, but not unwelcome. She hadn't shared space with anyone in years. Her own people had left her behind in the last evacuation. That night, she didn't sleep. She listened to his breathing, listened to the wind outside, and wondered why he never looked at her with fear. In the morning, the human was already up. He had found supplies in a cabinet and started heating water. He offered her a cup without a word. She accepted it and sipped slowly. Her hands were shaking, but she didn't spill a drop. He smiled softly. "You're stronger than you think. We'll call for pickup once the storm clears." Her voice cracked. "You're not afraid of me?" He looked surprised. "Why would I be? You're the only one who kept calm during the crash. I'd be dead without you." Her heart ached in a strange way. Her own kind had called her cursed. Her scales, they said, made her unfit, ugly, dangerous. But the human hadn't even noticed, or maybe he had. And it didn't matter to him. For the first time in her life, she felt seen. Asterisk, the storm raged for 2 more days. Thick snow buried the entry hatch and wind howled against the walls. The building shook sometimes, but it held. Inside, they survived by rationing the small food supply. The human adjusted the heater to cycle low and burn less power. The alien girl stayed wrapped in a blanket, her eyes following his every move. She had never been this close to someone from another species, let alone a male. Let alone in the same bed. He never once crossed the line. He spoke gently. Shared everything. Equally, listened when she talked, laughed at her jokes. Looked at her face, not her scales. She wanted to hate him. It would have been easier, safer, but she didn't. On the third morning, she woke up to find him coughing. His armor was still on, but his body was cold to the touch. He had given her most of the heat pack the night before without telling her. "You fool," she whispered. "Why would you do that?" He gave a weak smile. "You needed it more. Your species doesn't handle cold well. I read the files." She frowned and placed a hand on his forehead. His skin was pale and damp. "You'll freeze if you stay like this. You need body heat." He laughed faintly. "We already share a bed. What's left?" She didn't answer. She lay closer to him, pulling his arm over her. The moment was strange, new, but not uncomfortable. As hours passed, his breathing steadied. Her warmth spread through him slowly. She could feel the tension in his muscles melt away. That night, neither of them said much, but something had changed between them. Something they didn't speak about, yet both knew. In the morning, the storm had weakened. The sky outside was still gray, but clearer than before. Visibility was improving fast. The human climbed to the roof access. From there, he activated the emergency beacon manually. A signal shot into the sky, blinking red across the mountains. He returned to the room with frost on his armor. She helped remove the outer layer and rubbed his hands until warmth returned to his fingers. "You didn't have to do that alone," she said. "I know," he replied, "but I needed to see the stars." Just for a moment, they sat together near the heater. Steam rose from their mugs as silence settled over the room. "Why don't you look at me like others do?" she asked, quietly. "Why don't you flinch when I speak?" The human looked at her without hesitation. "Because you're not a monster. You're smart, you're kind, you saved my life. I don't care what your skin looks like." She blinked. Her throat tightened. Her hands curled slightly over the edge of the mug. "Back home," she said, "they called me cursed. Too sharp. Too orange. No male from my kind wanted me. Then they were blind," he said. She turned her head away, but not fast enough to hide the smile forming on her lips. Time moved slowly. Their conversations grew longer. They began to share more stories. Hopes, losses. She told him about the brother she lost in the war. He told her about the planet he left behind. The heater flickered once, and they both looked at it, but it stayed on. For now at least, by the 5th day, the snow began to melt. Sunlight touched the edge of the mountain. In the distance, a rescue ship was finally on its way. They stood outside the shelter as it landed. The human waved. She stood quietly beside him, her arms crossed. A soldier stepped down and called his name. "We've been looking for you," the man said. "We thought you were dead." The human glanced back at the girl. "Not dead. Just lucky." As they boarded the ship, the alien girl paused at the doorway. She turned to look at the shelter. One last time, something had changed in her. Not just survival. Not just warmth, something that looked like trust. The rescue ship lifted off slowly. Inside, the human sat near the window, watching the mountains shrink below. The alien girl sat beside him, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Neither of them spoke for a while. The silence wasn't cold or awkward. It was full of questions they weren't ready to ask. The crew didn't say much to her. Most stared and looked away quickly. She was used to that. But this time, it didn't bother her like before. He sat beside her without flinching. His calm presence was enough to make the stairs feel smaller. When the ship docked at the orbital station, they were checked for injuries. Medics scanned them and cleared them for rest. The human was given a room in the officer wing. She was assigned a smaller, isolated cabin near the cargo bay. When they parted, she thought it would be brief, just a night of separation. She didn't know why, but it made her chest feel heavier than expected. She lay in the narrow bed, staring at the dull ceiling. The lights were dim, the air was dry and too quiet. Her body was warm, but the space beside her felt too empty. In the other wing, the human paced back and forth. He had food, he had comfort, but he didn't have peace. He opened the door and left. His room. His steps echoed through the corridor as he walked toward the cargo bay. She heard the door chime and sat up quickly. When she saw him, her heart skipped. "Is everything all right?" He smiled and held up a blanket. "I can't sleep." She looked at the floor. Her voice was softer now. "I thought you would forget me the second we reached safety. I've forgotten a lot of things in my life," he said. "But I won't forget you." He lay down beside her, careful not to touch her without invitation. She shifted slightly, letting the edge of the blanket fall over both of them. Time passed. Minutes turned into hours. The station moved silently through space. Inside the small room, two strangers rested closer than the stars outside. He asked. Her questions now, not about the war, not about species. Just about her, what she liked, what she hated, what she dreamed of. She told him about her childhood, her mother's lullabies, the sea caves of her homeworld, how she used to swim for hours, alone, where no one would see her scales. He listened without judgment. Every word from her was precious. Not because she was rare, but because she was real. She asked about Earth. Not the cities, not the wars. Just the simple things. What snow felt like in a city. What humans sang when they were sad. What a sunrise looked like from a quiet field. He described it all with care, as if every detail mattered. As if she mattered. In that small cabin, they built something fragile and new. It wasn't love, not yet. But it was something close. Days later, the station commander called for debriefing. The human was praised for surviving. He was offered a transfer to a safer post. He refused. He only asked one question. What will happen to her? The officer looked at him with confusion. The alien? Should be returned to her home sector once transport is available. She's not under arrest. He nodded but didn't smile. She saved me. She deserves better than to be forgotten. He returned to the cabin and sat beside her. They want to send you away. She looked at him but said nothing. You don't have to go, he added. You could stay with me, if you want. Her hands trembled slightly. What would people say? They'll talk, he replied. Then they'll move on. But I won't. Not without you. She lowered her eyes, her heart pounding. Then she gave a small, slow nod. For the first time in her life she was no longer afraid to be seen. Asterisk. The decision to stay was not easy. She had never lived among humans before. Their eyes followed her. Their words were polite, but their stares were not. Still she stayed. For him, because he had offered her something more than a place. He had offered her choice. They moved into shared quarters in the lower ring of the station. It wasn't large, but it was enough. A small bed. A narrow table. A window that showed the stars. At night, she would sit by the window and hum to herself. The sound reminded her of her mother. The human often listened in silence, never interrupting. He worked in the hangar, fixing scout ships and loading cargo. She joined the data unit, handling navigation maps. Her skills with memory and detail impressed the supervisors. They worked during the day. At night, they shared the same blanket again. This time by choice, no storm, no cold, just comfort. He never asked for more, never forced her into closeness, but she started leaning closer on her own. Her head would rest on his shoulder. Her hand would find his. One evening, they returned to find a message on the station console. It was from her homeworld. Her family had located her through the rescue logs. The screen showed her father's face. He looked older, tired, but there was regret in his voice. "You're alive. We didn't know. I'm sorry for what we said before." She didn't respond right away. She stood still, staring at the image long after it faded. He placed a hand on her back. "You don't have to answer them." "Not unless you want to," she whispered. "I don't know what I want." He nodded. "Then you can figure it out here, at your own pace." The next day, she sent a message, short, clear. "I'm alive. I'm not coming home. But I hope you're well." No reply came, but she didn't cry. She only sat by the window again, watching the stars blink quietly. Later that week, the human came home with a small gift. A silver pendant shaped like a spiral shell. "Reminded me of the sea caves you told me about." She took it gently. Her hands shook as she fastened it around her neck. She didn't speak, but her eyes said everything. Their closeness grew like light from a small fire. No flames, just warmth. Rumors spread across the station. Whispers about the alien girl who shared a room with a human. Some laughed, others frowned. Few dared speak to her directly. One day, she walked alone through the market wing. A group of officers blocked her path. One of them smirked. "Tell me, does the human kiss through scales? Or past them?" She said nothing, she only stared. Her eyes burned cold. The human arrived seconds later. He didn't shout, didn't threaten. He only looked at them and said, "Walk away." They laughed but moved. Some insults were sharp, but none cut as deep as silence. Back in their quarters, she touched her face gently. "You saw that?" "Yes," he replied. "I'll always see you. I won't look away." She stepped forward and rested her head on his chest. Her voice was soft. "You don't care what they say?" "Let them speak," he said. "They're not the ones I share my world with." That night, she placed her hand in his without hesitation. They lay together beneath the same blanket, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Weeks turned into months. Life aboard the station became normal. The stares grew less frequent. The whispers faded. The crew had other things to worry about. She walked through the halls with her head held higher. Her hands no longer trembled. When she spoke, the human always walked beside her, never ahead, never behind. They weren't lovers by declaration. They were partners by experience. They didn't need to explain what they were to anyone. Some accepted it. A few still frowned. But most just moved on. In space, survival mattered more than appearance. She decorated the room with soft lights and small objects from the trading bazaar. A carved stone from a desert moon. A folded flower made of starglass. A painting of a mountain shaped like a claw. He added his own touches. A wooden box of earth soil. A photograph of a blue sky. A small cloth patch with his family crest. Together, they made it a home. Then one morning, a message arrived. Not from her people, not from the station, but from Central Command. A new threat had emerged along the outer rim. The human was called back into duty. A pilot was needed for a scouting mission. It was voluntary, but urgent. He read the details in silence. Then looked at her. "You don't have to go," she said. "I know," he replied. "But I want to. It's just recon, 2 weeks. I'll come back." She nodded, but her breath caught. She had learned to be strong. But that didn't mean she wanted to be alone again. She helped him prepare his bag, checked every strap, adjusted his collar. Her hands moved with care, but her eyes stayed low. He touched her chin and lifted it gently. "You're not the same girl I met in the snow. You're stronger now." "I'm only strong because you saw me," she whispered. He kissed her forehead, then her hand. "I'll be back before the station rotates twice. Stay near the coms." She watched the ship leave the docking bay. The light from the engines faded into the black of space. The window grew cold against her skin. Every day, she waited. worked, checked the coms, slept near the console instead of the bed. 10 days passed, then 12, then 14. Still no signal. On the 10th day, an alert rang out across the station. A small vessel had returned with damage. Minimal life signs were detected. One survivor was being pulled from the wreckage. Her heart stopped as she ran, inside the medical bay. She saw him, bruised, burned, alive. He smiled as soon as he saw her. Weakly, but with the same warmth as before. "Told you I'd come back." She stood frozen for a second, then rushed forward and held him tightly. The doctor warned her to be gentle. She nodded but didn't let go. For hours, she sat by his side. Her hand never left his. His pulse was faint but steady. His eyes never left hers. "You waited," he said. "I always will," she replied. As he recovered, the station buzzed with the story. The human who almost didn't return. The alien girl who never gave up. No one laughed anymore. No one whispered. The story spread through the outer systems. Not just of survival, but of connection. Of two souls that refused to break. She no longer hid her face. No longer lowered her voice. She walked tall, with her head held high, and every night they shared the same bed. Not for warmth, not for safety, but for love.